Welcome to the Planning Board meeting, Thursday, June 5th, 2025. Can we stand up and do the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first item on our agenda is board business. Does anyone have any comments about the minutes from May 15th? Any comments? Can I hear a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the minutes of
May 15th.
May 15th.
Can I hear a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Bills, do we have any bills?
We do have bills. We have one peer review bill from Green International and a year-long reimbursement for training and workshops, etc. for me.
So you take the budget item and, okay. Okay, we'll pass this around. Okay, member input and member update on projects. I just want to say that Lupoli will be here next meeting. In the meantime, they are scheduling a, I don't know if we call it a presentation, but an update for the Board of Selectmen. So if we find out when that is, any one of us can attend that.
Yeah, I was going to ask, except our Board of Selectmen, or Select Board representative's not here tonight on it, is why is he briefing the Select Board on the status of this project before presenting to us?
I don't know.
Because we're the governing authority on that project, not the Select Board. And I'm just a little concerned about the precedent that this is setting.
Then I would, if you
and that's why I was
wish,
hoping the Select Board representative was here.
I would talk to Jim Dugan, because I think this was at his request. Okay.
When Mark shows up, I may re-ask that question with him present.
One item on here's a town newsletter, and I've dropped the ball on that. And do we have any ideas about something that we could? Well, here's Mark. We were just discussing. Go ahead.
Yeah, I understand Lupoli is presenting to the Select Board some status updates on their project, and I'm wondering why they're briefing the Select Board before us, because we're the governing authority on that project. And some reason, I guess it was scheduled to brief the Select Board at Jim's request. Is that policy that Select Board has inserted themselves into these projects at this point?
To my knowledge, there's nothing scheduled for Lupoli coming in front of us. It's not on our agenda for Monday. I don't know why he wouldn't be in front of you guys and just invite us to the meeting. That makes more sense to me.
So, Daryl, I invite you to talk to Jim Dugan.
We should just make it a joint meeting and do it together.
Yeah, I mean, they will be at our next meeting.
Okay.
So, okay, town newsletter. Does anyone have any ideas about a subject?
Right. So we did a brief update on results of town meeting regarding the zoning articles. So that made it into the June newsletter.
Okay.
We had talked about an idea for the July newsletter. Was it the floodplain mapping update?
These are all just so wonderful, enticing, and entertaining items for the...
Oh, no. It was the socioeconomic report. The 495 Metro West Partnership has published their annual socioeconomic snapshots for each community in the 495 partnership region. And Cooper was going to do a newsletter on those results.
I think that's
and just
excellent.
announced that.
I think people would be interested in that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. They always put out such a good graphic.
Yeah, and
That-
I think I've seen that.
Yeah, we did a news flash on it.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
So, great.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
before we move on, going back to Northern Bank, at the last meeting, Select Board Member Rambacher mentioned something about the crosswalks related to the Northern Bank development. And so I don't know that there's a next step for us. I just wanted to touch back on that and see if there is a next step for us as to who identifies where the crosswalks go. And since you walk that space a
I'm
lot.
very interested in that.
I'm sure you are.
As I understand it, the flashing lights that we're getting a grant for would not be, one of them would not be at that location?
There are no flashing lights currently scheduled on 119.
Okay. So, and in the past, we've been unable even to get a crosswalk there. So Maren, how do we go about this?
I will ask Town Administrator's Office if there's any update on their work with the state
Okay.
on this. Their work between the state and Northern Bank
Yeah.
on this.
Thank you, yeah,
So.
Imagine when you cross the street, now you
I have
too
been
could have
crossing that
crosswalks.
street for 30 years, and what I would say is that in general, people sometimes stop.
Sometimes you have to run.
When they're not completely speeding, in that spot. But there are people from the neighborhood, Adams Street neighborhood, who bring their kids over on our dead-end street to ride bikes and stuff, and they can have a hard time. Anyway, okay, so we're not at 6:40 yet. Any other board business that anyone has that they would like to bring up? This is also a time where we ask if there's any public input from anyone here. And this is the time to bring it forward. Non-specific to some of the hearings we're going to have. I would like to say that we've had a lot of cancellations in our hearing schedule. The 6:40 stormwater permit hearing for Harwood Avenue lots 1 and 2 is being continued while peer reviewers work through. The continued public hearing at 64 Beaver Brook Road for stormwater review is being continued for the same reason. The 7:10 informal discussion of the National Grid project, stormwater regulation inquiry, and I want to say to anyone who's watching that this is a maintenance project for the power lines that go through part of our town, and they're coming before us to say, hey, we want to do this work. Thanks, bye. And we have to decide the parameters that they need to meet to do this work. That was not a hearing, it was just a discussion. What we've decided to do, because the 7:30 public hearing is the one that will probably have the most interest, is to move we have an A&R, the 7:20 is scheduled for the A&R at the Nagog Hill Orchard, which is not a public hearing, and we can dispose of that. And we have a
7 o'clock?
the 7 o'clock, the 97 and 99 Mill Road, which is the site of the old Parley Lumber Mill application, and it's not a hearing, it's a presentation by Light and Water about what they plan to do there. And we thought we'd move that forward in the yawning minutes that we had before 7:30. So that being said, can we go ahead with that?
Should ask the two people that are here what they're here for.
Yeah, and by the way, anyone else who's here, I went through that so that if you were here for any of these items, you don't have to stay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dave Ketchum, Assistant General Manager of the Littleton Light and Water Departments. Thanks for having us tonight. As Jeff stated, we are here for the 97 and 99 Mill Road battery storage project that we're proposing. With me tonight, I have Dan Sievers, PE from the Moore and Cameron Group, and Steve Byrne, who is our partner on this project with Citizens Energy. That's the battery company that we're looking to go with. So on this project we're proposing, we want to install peak shaving batteries along the 495 corridor part of the parcel that essentially is we're going to use as peak shaving mechanisms to help save us cost on our transmission and capacity costs and try and keep rates low. So this is a similar concept to how we operate now with our natural gas fired generators at R39 Air Road main office site. So essentially during peak hours, we will dispatch these batteries onto our distribution system to shave our peak load and help us save on power supply costs. And then during off hours, these batteries will stay charged until another peak event comes up. So that's sort of a quick rundown of it. I'm going to pass it over to Dan. He's going to present on the site and the project, and then Steve can follow up on that as well. So Dan, go ahead.
Thank you, Dave. For the record, my name is Dan Sievers. I'm a licensed professional civil engineer with the Moore and Cameron Group at 66 Elm Street in Danvers, Massachusetts. We have the pleasure of being the civil engineer and surveyor for this proposed battery energy storage system project located at 97 and 99 Mill Road. We have been working with David Ketchen and Steve Burns on developing the site plans for this proposed project. A little background on 97 and 99 Mill Road. The property is situated along the boundary of Route 495 to the north, Beaver Brook, a perennial stream to the south, and located at the intersection of Warren Street and Mill Road. The property is in the Industrial B zoning district and is a previously developed property that has been used as such for the better part of the century. It was previously used as a lumberyard, and some evidence is still present on the ground today. The property was recently acquired by Littleton Electric and Light Department and is now being used for municipal electric and light operations, as well as other temporary contracting uses such as material stockpiling. The bulk of the proposed work associated with the project is primarily within the riverfront area. So as a previously developed site that was developed prior to August 1st, 1996, this would be considered a previously developed degraded site. From a stormwater perspective, according to 310 CMR 10.58 Section 5, the proposed work on site is considered a redevelopment within previously developed riverfront area because it falls entirely within the footprint of the developed riverfront area. While we are proposing work within the 100 and 200 foot riverfront areas, the proposed work will increase the natural buffer between the stream bank and the developed site, reduce degraded riverfront area on site by approximately 600 square feet, and decrease the overall total impervious area on site by about 20,000 square feet. Additionally, we are proposing to restore an area of gravel road and material piles totaling approximately 4,300 square feet, with about 1,000 square feet of that being on site. Overall, the proposed work on site is an improvement to existing conditions and meets the Massachusetts Stormwater Standards and Rivers Protection Act performance standards for a previously degraded riverfront redevelopment project. With that being said, I'll hand it off to Steve. Thanks.
Hi, my name's Steve Byrne. I'm the Director of Resiliency for Citizens Energy Corporation. It's essentially a not-for-profit energy company that is based in Boston. Founded in 1979 by Joseph P. Kennedy II, oldest son of Robert F. Kennedy. So for those of you that have been around, Jeff, you mentioned you've been here for 30 years. You remember Joe for oil, Joe Kennedy.
Yeah, I remember the heating oil.
So
Yeah.
same concept. We are. I've been there since 2018. I'm now responsible for energy storage and microgrid projects, but the bulk of Joe for Oil has become what we refer to as Joe for Sun. It's a low-income community solar program, so we're still doing for-profit projects like this one to then fund our charitable programs and our mission to make life's basic necessities more affordable to those in need. For this project specifically, we've been working with Littleton Electric with Dave, Nick, Pat, and Scott for probably the better part of a year or two to get it to where we are now. We've been working to get the location to be right, to get the system to be right, and we are working with other local authorities to make sure that they are satisfied with any plans that we have in place for the system when it's up and running. So we've had contact with the fire department for battery energy storage. That's usually one of the first people that we contact when we're interested in a project in the local AHJ to make sure that they are aware of the project, if they have any questions, and we are working closely with Chief McCurdy and Officer Taylor. But aside from that, I'm happy to answer any questions. As Dave said, these are lithium-ion batteries that'll be charged during low-cost hours, usually late at night, between midnight and 4 a.m., and then they will be discharged during peak times to lower the cost to the Littleton Electric Light ratepayers. And that's pretty much the basic use case. It'll be participating in some ISO New England stuff off hours and when there's no peaks, but that will be something that has little to no impact on what you guys are looking at here. So aside from that, Littleton Electric has more plans for the site. We're the first ones to be part of this redevelopment, so we're trying to set it up that the rest of the parcel can also be developed as they see fit. So we are just one small piece that we're trying to keep it isolated and in the right areas.
Can you give us an idea about what these look like, these batteries, dimensions, or I think I saw something.
So these are 20-foot containers, so it essentially looks like a shipping container.
Yeah.
We have a very similar project we just put into operation in Wellesley.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially they're 20-foot containers. They would have large doors that open, and then essentially you see there are battery modules that are stacked. So if you know what a computer, like a data center looks like, where you see the computer servers lined up, those are essentially what these batteries look like when you open that door. That's really it. We have 4 containers full of batteries. We have 2 skids that'll have the PCS, the inverters on there, the inverter equipment, and then some interconnecting equipment to go to Littleton Electric. That's what you see. So the 4 on my left here are the battery containers. Then you have the 2 skids, and you have the other interconnection equipment. So it's under 10,000 square feet. Is it 4,500? Yeah. So it's a pretty small footprint, but we are meeting we're trying to keep it small, keep it condensed, meeting all the requirements to go to fences and setbacks. We are looking to make sure that there's drive around for emergency vehicles. So we're doing everything that we can to make it accessible and for future use for the site as well.
Will there be any lighting for security or work?
We are proposing to put lights on. I think there are 4, one on each end of those poles.
Okay, and we have a bylaw about night sky lighting, so we presume they're not going to be like 100-foot pylons, blaring down.
No, whatever
yeah.
you guys suggest.
Yeah.
We have in other spots there on the containers. These are proposed
Okay.
not to be on the container. I'm not sure if we'll have security. We have security at half of our sites now. Not sure if we're gonna need security here. But yeah, I mean, however you guys wanna let us know what we can look up the bylaw and we would meet those requirements.
Yeah, it just means that the light is directed toward the ground instead of toward off the site or glaring into neighbors. Questions? Anna?
So, you talked about the lithium ion battery. Is there any concern about the need for fire mitigation? I mean, are these the kind of batteries that you have to worry about?
We will have an emergency response plan in place. That's why we reach out to the fire department up front. This is the way that citizens and we have done our projects is we use fully designed and engineered solutions. So we work with an integrator. We're not piecing this together. We're going with a solution that's been tested, it's UL certified. We are doing as much mitigation as we can.
Okay.
Similar to EVs, there is the risk of that. There's a risk of that with a regular gas car as well. I don't want to minimize that, but we are doing any and everything that we can to mitigate that. Essentially, at a very high level, there's a battery management system that's going to be in place that as soon as something with voltages or temperatures kind of goes outside of a range of what the manufacturer suggests, the rack will shut down.
Okay.
So we are fully aware of that, and the last thing that we want as a company is to be on the news for having one of those fires. But
Yeah, we don't want that either.
the mitigation itself it's still evolving. We work with local companies, Jensen Hughes. There's another company called ESRG, and they're always trying to help us and help the MLPs with how the emergency response should work. So we do a full emergency response plan with the fire department. We do fire department. We'll set up for them to come down in their companies. Wellesley, we did like 6 different visits where they just came and got to know what the site was, what our suggestions were for any response that would be needed, and then also kind of identifying at Wellesley, they're right next to one of their substation buildings, so that was more important than any of the equipment that we have. Both are insured, but that equipment was more important. It would cause a much bigger outage to the town, so that's the kind of thing that we would be looking to do, that type of training. This is on a site that happens to be near the highway, so there'll be other mitigation
Agreed.
there.
There's still a lot of trees around though, so
Yep.
that's part of the reason why I wanted to ask. And then the other one you mentioned, security if needed. So are you talking about security so there isn't any sort of trespassing or tampering? Is that the kind of security you were talking about, or something else?
Well, we just put security up sometimes, depending on the area. Security cameras.
Oh, security cameras.
yeah.
Okay.
That's really it. So our asset management team, or our 24/7 NOC operations center can have eyes on the system to see if something's going on there. People are there. We have a pretty robust system to make sure people check in and check out of the site, but there's no checkout. That could be, is there an issue? You can check the camera.
All right. Thank you.
Bartlett?
Well, I'm glad that if the batteries do explode, they're near 495 and not near the creek. There is conservation land across the creek and by that zigzag line up at the top left. That's conservation land. And I was just wondering if I'm involved in another project where there's a 40-foot setback off of conservation land. That's, I think, a no do not disturb. It's highlands like that. It's relatively dry. So I'm just wanting Light and Water to acknowledge that and to work with conservation about how to treat that border. And one suggestion, it's not really part of this program, is that I've recently run into a situation where trees were taken down and they needed to be replaced according to conservation. And there's a lot of empty space there. And I was wondering if you and conservation could work out a deal that for places that don't have the room to plant new trees, if you could have a place that would be designated for people to put replacement trees. And then it would sort of naturalize that side of the
You're
river.
talking about outside of this?
Well, yeah, outside of the
project.
perimeter, but on your property,
But-
in the floodplain, just.
You're
Like
talking
along
about
Beaver
not this project specific, just on
It's
the
just
property?
on the property, just because you're here and we're talking.
Yeah, it's something we definitely could consider. That, I would have to go back and,
Yeah.
check with our board on that and Nick. But that's definitely something we could consider in the future.
Okay.
We are working with conservation on this project specifically, so we're still working through that process as well. I don't anticipate trees being removed, but if there are,
No, but-
I know conservation has,
Yeah.
has policies for replacements and locations.
Right. Okay.
But I hear what you're saying, and aside from this
Right.
project, I know where the conservation land is, to the south of the brook, and
Yeah.
I acknowledge that.
And the other observation I've made is that Beaver Brook does flood quite extensively. The two bridges under Mill Road and under 119.
Yeah, and I think.
Flood. I mean, they act as dams.
Right. Yeah, that's.
Which I'm sure you know.
So I think we were trying to place these outside of the 100-foot flood zones.
Right.
Very strategically, so
Yes.
hopefully we're
No,
being clear of that, but you never know.
Right, I understand that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Can I ask, how long have you been doing these, and what is your experience with them?
I've been part of Citizens since 2018.
Mhm.
Prior to Citizens, I worked at National Grid, and I was part of a joint venture between National Grid and Xterra. That's where I got my feet wet with battery development. So I've been doing this since about 2016. We have 3 standalone storage projects in operation now, along with 1 microgrid that includes battery energy storage down in Connecticut. So those have been in service and in operation since 2021. 1 in Holyoke, 1 in Wellesley, and then 1 down in Philadelphia, in the Philadelphia Navy Yard. And then we have a microgrid in New Britain, Connecticut with the Daughters of Mary.
Okay. Daryl, do you have questions?
Just a few. I think I've been working through the thing here just to get oriented correctly. So you're outside of the FEMA flood zone. It comes up, not down from
Right.
the piece there. But can you address there's the red line about the 100-foot and 200-foot riverfront area piece there? You seem to be cutting through the 200-foot area.
So
I'm just trying to, there's a very busy chart.
Yeah, so
graphic.
the legend for conservation has it so we show the 100 and 200-foot riverfronts as red.
Mhm.
We are outside of the 100-foot riverfront area, and we are proposing to reduce impervious surface on site overall. So I guess, what is your question exactly?
I was just making sure I understood
Okay.
the diagram properly
Yeah.
here. But you said about fire department access. I don't, it's hard to, again, this is a very busy chart. So what is the fire department access down to those batteries?
So there's access from Mill Road onto the site. I guess that'd be to the north corner of the property. And on I believe the third sheet, you maybe has a better look at the area around the proposed enclosure, where you can see we've got proposed grading around there to make it accessible for emergency fire vehicles or whatever vehicle that needs to make it around there to be able to access from the whole enclosure itself.
Can you show me where that is on this diagram? I just see,
Yeah,
these 2 lines here are those the access that you're talking about, or are those just look like they were
So I think you're pointing to the
markers there?
the distances between the
Yeah, that's what I
enclosure.
mean. So I don't see an access.
So the access is just
mechanism
around
there.
the entire enclosure. There's no defined access route, if that's what you're
I
implying.
believe
On page 2, in the lower
it's
corner.
Where those 2 measurements are, that's the access between the enclosure, the fenced-in area, and the existing buildings.
Lauren, go back to page 2.
Yeah, so
Now, in the lower left, right-hand corner, that shaded area is the gravel.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So the equipment stays outside the fence?
The batteries are
First
inside.
responders?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
100%.
Right. Okay. All right, that answers that question there. Does any of the equipment produce sound, noise? Either high-pitched or,
The inverters and the transformers will have some noise associated with them, and the battery containers will have air conditioning units, but they're sound, but they're low volume. It's not. The reason why I'm trying to differentiate that, our first group of projects are actually walk-in containers, which with giant HVACs on the roof, so those have a lot more sound. These are more, you're going to hear something turn on within the container and turn off, but the inverters and the transformers will have some sounds associated with them for sure.
And do you have a frequency sound level profile of those to make sure that they won't annoy the abutters?
If I can get that, I don't have anything.
Yeah, I think that's something that, to make sure we address, that we're not creating something, it's both the low pitch,
Yeah,
high frequency stuff and the
Yep.
low frequency stuff that is
I can get that,
travels.
but the neighbors should not hear this equipment.
Okay,
Unless there's something wrong. And it's winding loud.
Well, that would be the alarm going off.
That's
But anyway, I think making sure that the sound, that we have something about sound in that. And then I guess this would be for, not necessarily you directly, but you said improvements to the site. What's the plan for all of this hodgepodge of old buildings? Because with them all there, it doesn't look like the site's getting cleaned up at all.
Yeah, so,
So what's the plan there?
Right now, we are, if you can see the big garage sort of in the center of the plan, we are currently, we've designed a plan and are hiring contractors to redo that garage building to sort of give it a facelift. We're going to make some changes internally to it. The rest of the buildings on site, we don't have a firm plan for yet. So those will be just standing as is for now until we come up with a plan for them.
So while you're here, from Light and Water, a couple tangential issues to this property have been brought forward. One is, when we did our recreation plan a year or two ago, this site was identified as a let-in for kayaking, canoeing on Beaverbrook, which does occur. And I'm just putting that out there. It's not, I acknowledge it's
Okay.
not part of this project.
Yep.
But I want you guys to know that there's some expectation that this site would be used for that. I mean, you certainly can't use the riverfront for anything else. And then there was another issue about as the Beaverbrook goes through underneath 495, and I don't pretend to know what that's about.
Okay.
But these are some issues. When this is in play for a site plan, these type of things are going to come
Okay.
up.
Okay. I will take that back. Definitely.
And likewise, I consider the plan for the rest of those buildings in terms of cleaning up the site and reducing the impervious.
Yep.
I would like to see what the overall plan for that is.
Yeah, like I said, we don't have that right now. But once we have it, we'll be sure to share it.
That was part of our challenge to get it to where it is, because Littleton Electric doesn't, their plan to us was that the buildings that are there are going to stay in place. There is some area right where our site is that has like I just want to call it a shed. It's like a half shed that'll get removed. So everything will be clear around there. It's on the 495 side, but the buildings themselves, the larger buildings, that's outside of the project.
And I understand the scope of your project, but the scope of the site's work, I think we should have a clear plan so that I'm uncomfortable continually to improve little micro changes, not knowing what the overall plan for the site is.
Okay.
Because it's hard to see that it will end up with a net improvement versus micro changes that sounded good, but when you look at the context, none of the buildings changed, none of the impervious changed.
Right.
You can't see that from tiny little, one project at a time.
Right.
pieces there. So that's more towards Littleton Electric and Light and Water. Not, I understand your scope.
So is this project tied to that plan? Because like I said, we don't have that plan and.
No, but the point Mr. Baker's making is make a plan. You know, I mean,
Well, particularly as it's going to start relating to stormwater and any other
Yeah.
changes there, having an understanding of what the overall picture and plan is so that we can understand how these small projects are contributing towards that bigger plan
Okay,
is, in my mind, very significant.
okay.
and it may be more of a conservation commission issue also, because this is a pretty sensitive site.
Okay.
And some of your, the existing, you know, there's one existing building that projects into the 100-foot buffer.
Right.
And maybe you should think about how you dispose of those buildings as a negotiating point as you go forward with some of the other development on the site.
Okay.
Mark?
I had a question about the containers. Are they explosive proof, or are they just regular containers?
No, they'll have deflag panels there. If there is ever a thermal event, it should be limited to a battery rack, a battery module, or a battery rack. The containers that we have at Wellesley, which is version 1 of this is the next generation, they have deflag and they're explosion proof.
Yeah, so they'll, if something happens to the batteries, they'll be contained inside the containers.
Yep. The issue is the same with an EV, is putting the flame out, and is it out when you put it out? And so those are the things that the industry is addressing and struggling.
Well, I would assume if it's inside the container, it's going to go out very quickly because there's going to be very little oxygen inside there. Hopefully.
Hopefully, I can't say for sure.
Have you had any fires in your existing?
We have not. But like I said, we try to go above and beyond on the safety mitigation portion. I know it sounds like a sales pitch, but we were putting gas detection in before gas detection was part of the whole requirement. So these are going to be fully designed, engineered, and have more than what NFPA 855 requires as we start.
So is this a situation where we would want to request a letter from the fire department acknowledging
yeah.
the circumstances and
Yeah.
their approval?
I mean, we're,
Yeah, they're part of our permitting process. I
Yeah.
think when we go through the construction part, Massachusetts has a pretty rigid fire narrative requirement that we've done at both Holyoke and Wellesley, so
Sure, they're going to
they are
have to
100%
sign off on
involved.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, just to make extra sure. I have one more question.
sure.
So this is really for Dave and maybe Maren. So back when Parley Lumber was changing over before, there was some talk about the historical significance of the lumber yard, and that there apparently was a sign that said Parley Lumber. Has anybody seen said sign? Is it anywhere to be found? And if it is, should that really belong with the Historical Society?
I don't know off the top of my head where that might be. I can try and find out though. I'm
Yeah,
sure.
If your guys find it somewhere within those buildings, then
Yeah.
I'm sure that the Historical Society would probably be interested
Absolutely.
in that.
Yep.
And
No
let's
question.
say maybe there's ultimately room for some kind of, on this site was XYZ. I mean, I remember someone telling me it was one of the, at the time, it closed. It was the oldest continuously operating mill,
Wow.
sawmill in the state. So times change, it's no longer there, but, you know, you could go and get rough sawn pine and, you know, so, anyway.
Thank you
Definitely,
for doing
definitely.
that.
Yep.
Anything else? No? Well, thank you for your presentation. You will be before us with a, no.
No, this
formal
is this
stormwater?
is the site plan, and stormwater's not required.
Okay.
It's not.
Okay. So we've given you, we'd like to incorporate, you know, lighting. What else? noise, some kind of noise representation. Now, it's against 495, so, you know, I think this is a very appropriate place for this kind of thing. And I think it's a very appropriate property for you guys to have acquired, but it would be nice to get some additional community benefit beyond the light and water for conservation, for recreation. Now, we talked a little bit about historic. And that
clean up of the site.
Well, yes, that's part of whatever plan. I'm sure you'll make use of whatever you can. So that's our feedback, and it's not necessarily officially part of this project.
So the board should take a vote on the site plan. Do you want to do that this week, or do you want a draft decision beforehand?
How do we feel?
I'm willing to approve it with the conditions that we've talked about.
Do you want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the site plan with the conditions that we've noted about lighting and noise and possible recreational use of the waterfront,
And a letter from the fire department,
and a letter from the fire department. But that would, I think, would happen anyway, but.
just to make sure.
Can I hear a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you. Keep you guys updated.
Yeah, let's save some money.
Oh, you did good, you stretched that out.
We stretched it out. Okay. So can we do the A and R now that was scheduled for 7:20?
I don't think they know what they're gonna do with the buildings.
Pardon?
I don't think they know what
No,
they're
no,
gonna do.
they
Storing crap.
they bought it. The advocates for recreation, et cetera.
So if you recall from town meeting passed Article, 14? To transfer care, custody, and control of Lot 107B, which is on the right-hand side of the plan, from Select Board to Conservation Commission.
Sign all of them.
And this, if you would sign the Mylar and like 2 copies of the plan, that would be helpful. So we have the application signed by town administrator and the A&R plan from the engineer and the recommendation, the request from the Conservation Commission to move this forward.
That's it, 4 pages, right?
Yeah, one of them's Mylar, I hope, the back one.
Yeah, the back one. Is there gonna be access to this land for people to walk and stuff like this down to the pond, or, I don't know?
I haven't heard any of the discussions about how it would be used. I know that the Conservation Commission has had a lot of active plans on how to utilize the various properties, but not
Sort
been part of that
complicated by
conversation.
You can't, use the pond.
Yeah, it wouldn't be an activity that welcomes residents to the edge of the pond. Recommend you take a vote on it.
Pardon?
I would recommend a vote.
May I hear a motion to approve the A and R of Lot 107A on Nagog Hill Road?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
While we're on this thing, why are they cutting the trees down? The apple orchard trees, is it?
Apple tree blight.
That's what this. Well, how come some and not all of them?
Those that have contracted the blight disease, those have to be removed or it will spread even further. So,
You say so. It's just funny that they're all like one whole swath in front.
yeah, yeah. And so you'll know, if you read Cooper's newsletter about the new
Operator?
thank you, the new operator for this portion that was leased, that the town leased to, I'm not even remembering the name,
Mr. Bransfield?
Bransfield, yeah.
There's actually somebody who's going to try to restore the orchard.
No, Bransfield Operations grows trees in containers for sale. So uses containers on site and does irrigation within those containers and then eventually sells the
So we'll
trees.
lease them bought some of the land there just to grow trees.
Yeah, yeah. Leased a lot of the APR property to this operation.
Cooper will just collect it.
Kind of
Need
trees.
the top.
Top of the pen.
Oh, she has it. What kind of trees?
There's a long list.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
So it's a nursery operation.
yeah. I know that the Orchard Working Group spent a lot of time
Right.
developing the proposal and reviewing them and choosing this
We have,
operator.
we still have some time before the scheduled 7:30 hearing. Mark, you were on the working group, weren't you, about the orchard?
A little bit,
A little bit?
at the end.
How did we end up? I mean, we have an operator who's essentially gonna,
So Bransfield Tree Company, we signed a lease with them in February, March timeframe. They're growing, they're going to come in, and they're leasing all of the APR land, which is 40-some acres. They're going to be growing, their main business is going to be growing trees in pots. They're also going to have some fruit trees, some blueberries, that type of thing, pawpaws and that. So it's going to take, a couple of years for them to be fully operational on a lot of things.
great. Okay.
They're also leasing the upper barn, but not the lower barn or the house.
And what do we think is gonna happen to the parcel 107B?
So it's general municipal. We haven't really talked about doing anything with
What about the house? You gonna ever?
it. At some point, we're going to do something with the house.
Yeah, needs the rest store it. It's a shame to let it sit there.
It'll
You
be-
can't sell it though, can you?
Not without town meeting approval. It's very expensive for the town to rehabilitate it, so we'll be looking to do something probably in November or at the October town meeting or the following May. It hasn't been decided yet.
Well, thank you for all your work on that. Okay, we have 12 minutes. And since this is a noticed hearing, we can't start. We can't start. Unless, Tom, you determined you could do your presentation about the agricultural use laws outside of the hearing or before the hearing starts?
I really think we should do it.
I serve at your pleasure,
Don't say that.
but it wouldn't be part of the hearing.
Yeah. Well, I think we should just
wait.
tie it up. in the hearing.
I'd like to actually let them present and then,
Okay.
if that's okay with you.
We're meeting in July, right?
July 10?
Everybody, is that good for everybody?
I think we looked at that.
It's a Thursday.
The second Thursday. Okay, that makes
Lauren, any update as to when they're gonna start paving the roads at the Richter Park? part of the good of that.
Oh, I'm not part of those discussions.
That's not,
That's between MassDOT and contractor.
well, some of it, right? I think Russell Street's us. I'm sure they're waiting for school's out for that.
The DPW just posted their street repair, their street paving schedule.
What about Foster Street? How about that?
Work is moving forward, it's going right along.
Yeah, I can tell, yeah, it's closed. I can't ride my bike up the hill, I have to go around.
Yeah.
When do they think they're gonna put the sidewalks in, like, who's riding it by the fall?
Seeing the construction schedule on that. There was so much work to be done with all the utilities and the full depth reconstruction.
And all the ledge they take out of there, widening the road.
You notice they're finishing the sewer at, toward Acton Medical.
Oh, yeah.
They're working on that right now.
I think so, yeah. But they gotta go ready to start paving. Should I? No, actually, he probably doesn't know anything about that. They had light water.
And Mark said the selectmen know about any more than we do.
Yeah, just nothing.
Strength in numbers report that I was talking about earlier, that Cooper's going to focus on for the July newsletter. This is the graphics from that. So, and I did do a quick comparison to this report from last year. We're growing just a little bit slower in this 11-year period than if you move it back 1 year. Let's see, housing cost burden, the rental burden in Littleton is tan color, remains extremely high. We've built a few more structures, housing units since 2000, with the extra year compared to last year. And one thing I did notice was the number of people employed in Littleton total, which is this same here, average monthly employment, is down just a little bit from a year ago. So, but the number of business establishments is actually up. So Framingham State works with the 495 Metro West Partnership on gathering statistical information and preparing all of these reports for each community in the region. I just think it's exciting. It's exciting to me when it comes out. It gives us a snapshot with some good graphics, interesting graphics.
Did we continue these ones?
Oh, yeah, actually.
Oh, yes, we.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cooper.
So we should
Item
vote
number
on
2,
continuing.
I'd like a motion to continue the public hearing for Harvard Avenue lots 1 and 2 stormwater permit. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So that'll be continued to the meeting of July 10th, and we've got a suggested time of
7:30.
7:30.
Okay. The item 3, continued public hearing for 64 Beaverbrook Road, stormwater review. Can I have a motion to continue?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So that one will be continued to Thursday, July 10th at
7:50.
We have something going on before this? Well, Napoli,
Well, we'll have a continuation of this hearing.
Napoli and
this.
National
sewer update.
Right, sewer update from.
I don't know, I'd
Light
move it I'd move it.
And probably
Tighten it
National
up.
Grid.
I'd tighten it up, because in July to be sitting here twiddling our thumbs.
We're important people. We-
No, it's
Well,
like
we've
nice
got
outside.
we've got a date certain anyway. We'll work on this schedule.
Anything else going on?
So, you're, I think it was a little bit before your time, but when you look at the 37%, 1959 or earlier, I mean, were you aware of a lot of building going on?
We historically grew early on at
Yeah.
1,000 people every 10 years.
Like after the war?
Yeah. No, even when we first got it, when I was first on the planning board, it was like, we only grew 1,000 people every 10
Yeah.
years.
Well, it hasn't really picked up.
It hasn't. It's still, Littleton doesn't have a lot of land.
When I first moved here, it was like almost, it seemed like it was more than between 7,000 and 8,000, and now it's 10,000.
No, it's 10, but that's.
And Diane
30
Corey
years.
seems to say that you hear different numbers.
But it's taken 30 years, so
Yeah.
1,000 people a year,
Yeah.
every 10 years. That's the way we saw it. But 54 was like the average number of building permits when I was first on the board. That's not a lot of houses.
No.
And we had no apartments, we weren't allowed, you know, so you got very little, maybe it's just like 3 years. And we haven't really had, Sal's office gonna put us off the chart.
Yeah.
A bit,
Well, maybe. I don't know.
well, yeah. But that's about it. That's where our growth is gonna be. There's not a lot.
Yeah, because there's not many single family homes. I mean, you know, the 20 Epic Temples.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see what happens with this auxiliary.
Maybe, well, I had, this project I had in Newton, he hasn't sold it. He said people just sort of scratch their head and go like, why would I want it?
What's how big, like 1,500 feet is about the max?
Well,
right?
I mean, it's total unit is like 3,000 square feet. And so,
For one for the extra unit?
no.
That's just that.
No, it's like 900. But I mean, it's part of, so it raises the cost of that. Very long. So he's really bummed.
I would do it if you already had a house and you wanted to add like a garage and put something above it as an income producer. That's about the only thing I could see.
Yeah, but then you have to deal with.
Yeah, I know. I could move out there. My wife could stay in the house. Have you talked to Mark and Jen?
I got this sort of run around between the two of them.
She's very easy to deal with. He's a pain in the ass. Well, as you
He
know.
was like, we should, get together and blah, 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 since December. And then I said, I can't do it. And then
Are you going to Booth Bay? Are you going up to?
I haven't heard from him. I will if you.
He's supposed
He
to
bought
buy
two.
two. That's what
He
I
did.
heard.
No, they've already done.
Oh, they're already done? Yeah.
He closed, I think, yesterday.
Oh, that was part of the selling this one.
Oh, yeah, because he rolls over.
1031 exchange, yeah.
Anyway, okay, it's now 7:30. We're here
clocks.
to open the public hearing on 600 Great Road, commonly known as the Gary's Farm Stand site, an Aquifer District Special Permit and Site Plan Review. We'll open with a presentation from the applicant. We have our town council here to give us a tutorial on agriculture use law. So with that,
good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for having us tonight. For the record, my name is Adam Costa. I'm an attorney with the firm of Mead, Tellerman and Costa with offices in Newburyport, Millis, and New Bedford, representing the applicant before you, Matthew Kozowski, and specifically Tender Crop Farm. As was indicated in the introduction, this is a site that I think you're probably all familiar with, been historically known as the Gary's Farm Stand site. We began our process of due diligence a few months back in communicating with your town staff and preparing to make applications. We viewed the use of the site as an agricultural use. Agricultural uses, as I suspect you all know, are subject to certain protections under Massachusetts state law, specifically what's often referred to as the Dover Amendment, Chapter 48, Section 3. It provides protection for historic and traditional agricultural uses, also provides separate protection for farm stands. In this district also explicitly allows greenhouses, which is an additional use that has historically been made of this site and is proposed to continue to occur in the future. Based upon the communications we had with staff, we were directed to make the applications that are before you tonight. One application for site plan review and a second application or related application for a special permit because the site is located in the town's Aquifer Protection Overlay District. It is our position that as an agricultural use, and I suspect we'll get into this a bit as we dig into the substance of the application, the language of the statute is specifically that agricultural uses can't be prohibited, unreasonably regulated, or subject to a special permit. And there's actually ensuing case law that suggests that they also can't be subject even to site plan review. What they can be subject to is they can be subject to some sort of a municipal review process that allows for reasonable regulation of the use. In this case, we're viewing these applications as the attempt by the planning board to reasonably regulate the use, and we're certainly welcome to subject ourselves to that regulation. We think we've put a lot of effort into the proposal that will go before you tonight, that'll be presented shortly, and I think you'll see that it offers a number of improvements to the site, but also some changes to the site from the historic use that was made by Gary's Farm Stand. Steve Sawyer and Eileen Graff, consultants on the project, are both here with me tonight as well. I'm going to make the introductory remarks. I'm then going to yield the floor to them to present the plans and answer any questions that board members may have, unless you prefer to hold your questions until the end. And then I'll attempt to sort of address in summary form. I'm not going to walk through sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph, the materials that you've presumably read, but I'll present in summary format why we believe this project and this plan satisfies your site plan review criteria, as well as the standards for the issuance of a special permit in the Aquifer Protection Overlay District. So with that, the next slide simply says some of what I've just stated to you. This is a proposal for a redevelopment of a site that is located both in the Residence District and the Aquifer Protection Overlay District. Situated on the site today is or are existing greenhouses, as well as a retail building. There's also a hot dog stand and a food truck that have been on the property for some time as well. The next several slides are going to show you this guy. And I think in a moment show you different photographs of the site that were taken just a few weeks ago. So obviously the site is non-operational at the time. It was largely a seasonal operation anyway, but will not be operational moving forward, hence the anticipated sale of the property and reuse of the property. As we scale these down, you'll see, I think there's maybe one or two before this. There we go. So that's the reference that I had made, as you know, to the existing retail building. That's the exterior shown from the front. There we go. Next photograph just shows, I think, a different angle, as we saw a moment ago, of that same retail building. These are some of the greenhouses located on the site today. You can see there's also a substantial amount of pavement on the site as well. Next photograph, different angle of the retail building from the side. Next photograph will show you sort of as if you spun around 180 degrees from the photograph you just saw, different angle of that same retail building. Next photograph shows the back of the retail building as well as one of the multiple greenhouses on the site. Again, some additional pavement on the site that exists today. Next photograph, different angle of that same building. Next photograph, closer up version of the photograph you saw a moment ago showing that greenhouse at the corner of the retail building. You can see that the greenhouses are in a general state of disrepair today. Next photograph. Again, just another photo of the greenhouse. There's another greenhouse located adjacent to the retail building. I think, here we go. So now you can see the greenhouse, but you can also see the restaurant that was referred to, the food truck that was referred to, sort of on the right side of the photograph there, looking kind of at the back or the side of that truck. We're going to see a different angle in a moment. Another view of greenhouses with the pavement leading up to them. This photograph shows the interior of the greenhouses as they exist today. Just portions of the site. You can see there's areas that are fairly overgrown today. Here we've got the hot dog stand, as we referred to it in the materials that we submitted. There's also a woodshed advertising firewood, as you can see there to the left of the hot dog stand. And there's also a couple of those clothing and book donation bins on the site as well. And the next photograph is going to show you, I think, yes, just a different angle of that hot dog stand, but you can see there are a couple of sheds that are being offered. If you zoom, you don't have to, but if you were to zoom in, you can see there's actually signage on the sheds indicating that it's advertising the sale of sheds from the site. I think there's a phone number to call, and you can also see that there's a couple of picnic tables on the site for individuals to sit and eat if they choose to do so. I think that may be the last photograph. It is. So the next several pages of the presentation are showing existing conditions plans, a zoning plan that is going to identify the standard or status of zoning compliance today as compared to zoning compliance as the project is proposed, and then a full development plan that is going to identify all the particulars in terms of site design. So with that, I'm going to yield the floor to my consultants who can address these plans in a generic sense. And again, I will defer to you, Mr. Chairman, as to whether the board wishes to ask questions about the site as the site plans are being presented, or whether you'd prefer to hear from me on the site plan review standards and special permit criteria first, and then open it up to the board for questions. I leave that to you.
I think we'd like, and for the benefit of the people here, to see the whole presentation, and then we can talk about how it fits into the site plan review.
Sure, we'd be happy to do that.
Good evening. My name's Steve Sawyer. I'm with Millennium Engineering, Inc. This is the existing conditions plan, which was created, it was surveyed and created by another company, Winter GEC, is the licensed surveyor on the project. So this plan depicts the overall existing conditions, showing the locations of the greenhouses in the retail building, along with there's some bins for storage of aggregate material at the left lower corner of the parking lot, the location of the hot dog stand in the upper left area of the parking lot, and also there's the general curb. There's a large curb cut on Great Road, which is a state layout, and a large open curb cut on Lawrence Street. I think we'll jump to the zoning plan. So the zoning plan shows the additions to the site. So you see on the right side of the plan, there's the existing retail building with the canopy is going to remain in place. The darker brown is the building addition that's going to basically displace two greenhouses, and then in front against the parking lot, There is going to be a new greenhouse that's going to displace the third. The third greenhouse will be demolished with a new greenhouse proposed. The bins, actually, on the site plan, at this point, let's jump to the site plan. So here shows the new site layout. Right now, there's no striping out there. As part of the renovation redevelopment, we're proposing to stripe the parking lot to give some formal layout for the parking so you can park more efficiently. Also, you can see we provided handicap parking. There's no handicap parking, so we provided the required amount of handicap parking right up against the retail building. Finally, we're going to provide a new loading dock at the bottom of the building. The access to that will be off of Lawrence Street. So the trucks would enter, pull forward, and then back down into the loading dock area where produce would be unloaded. And from there, the truck would exit, would pull through and off and circulate through the parking lot and then out onto Great Road, Route 119, as far as the new truck circulation. The other item with this is we'll be proposing a new septic system. You can see that in the open field area, there's a rectangle there. That's where the proposed leaching field is. We haven't formally designed the system itself yet, just for the fact we would wait to get through the planning board process before we submit with the Board of Health. One thing we did do, just to confirm the viability of the septic, is complete test pits on site. We completed the required test pits for the design of a new system. The soils we found were excellent, sand and gravel. They excavated down to 11 feet with no groundwater, no apparent groundwater encountered. So it's optimal for a proposed septic system. We need to work through the proposed flow based on depending on the use. It's probably going to be somewhere around 1,000 gallons per day, we're thinking. That can easily be accommodated. One item is the part of the new building. There's going to be a butchery added in the, well, actually it's not a butchery, but the sale of meats. It won't be butchered there, but it'll be a sale of their produce, which is homegrown meats. As part of that, there'd be floor drains and such. So with that, you'd need pre-treatment prior to disposing the runoff, or the sanitary flow to the septic system. So there would be a grease trap involved with that. So you'll see just off the building, you'll see there's two small rectangles, one being the grease trap and one being the standard septic tank for standard septic flow. And then finally, I guess on this, well, one thing on this plan, you'll see there's a bunch of circles along the south property line to the residents to the south. The proposal is to provide a arborvitae hedge for screening that property from the loading dock and the facility. And then finally, the dumpster would be relocated. You can see there's a shaded triangle. It's roughly where the dumpster is now, but it would be located just at the entry, off the entry off of Lawrence, and that dumpster would be enclosed. It'd be a full enclosure, solid enclosure to screen that from Lawrence Street. And that should do it. Actually, let's go to the next slide, please. So as part of, to adhere to the Aquifer Protection District, one thing that we are doing here is for the building, we're proposing additional infiltration chambers. So we're going to capture and infiltrate stormwater from the roof to recharge the groundwater. That's one of the important aspects of the Aquifer Protection District. And then the other item that we'll be doing is that the shaded areas, the new pavement, that shaded area will now be, that entire area will be captured through a drain at the bottom of the loading dock. One item that's a little bit tricky here is that the loading dock, we end up dropping the elevation there, so the grade is about 4 feet below the floor, so they have a level area for unloading of produce. at the loading dock. That creates somewhat of a hole or a swimming pool down there, so the water has nowhere to go. So we capture that in a trench drain, and then we pass it through. One of the important items of the aquifer protection is to pre-treat the water and pre-treat the water. So we're going to implement they call it a water quality unit. It's a high-tech treatment device that will settle all the solids, it settles the solids out and floats any oils and such out, so you have clean water discharging to a infiltration basin. So you'll see there's a rectangle just south or just below the loading dock, and that's a large concrete infiltration basin. And one thing that we had to do with this, where the water has nowhere to go, is we had to oversize it. This has to hold and infiltrate 100% of a 100-year event and infiltrate it back into the ground, which is a much higher standard that is usually provided for stormwater, but due to the location of this with no opportunity to daylight or for any overflow to run, we had to handle the stormwater in that manner. I think that basically covers it. As far as the, going back to lot coverages in the zoning table, I believe the lot coverage is in compliance. It's, I think, on the first sheet there. I don't know if you can zoom into the table up in the upper right. There we go. So the site has the required, it has a required frontage, required area. It meets the setbacks, all the setbacks. The lot coverage you can see currently is, what is that? Zoom in a little more. I haven't had it committed to memory.
Lot coverage.
Actually,
existing 52.5, proposed
60. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. So we're allowed is 60. We have 52.5, and then the proposed is 55. One item of note here on this zoning plan was that this is provided by the surveyor, and you'll note that he didn't actually, when I had completed the design plans after he completed this plan, so he didn't pick up the loading dock, but that I calculated what it would be to add that pavement. That's one thing that Littleton has, which is a little different than other towns, is they include pavement and lot coverage. Some towns it's just building, but Littleton includes the pavement. So the actual, including the loading dock, it's bumped to 59%. So we're still under the 60%. And then as far as building height, 32 feet is allowed. The existing is 16.3, and then the proposed is 29.5. So all within the zoning regulations. So with that, the site as the proposed site is designed complies with the Littleton zoning regs.
And before Eileen Graff speaks, I just want to add there is one clarification or correction I'll make, which is that everything we're proposing as new construction complies with your current zoning bylaw standards, dimensional standards, and otherwise. The existing building is according to that plan, and I won't make you, Ms. Tuchel, zoom in again, but you can see it is marked on the plan that's on the screen right now. The existing setback is 28.7 feet from the right-of-way, from the Great Road right-of-way, and it's required to be 30 feet. So that does not meet the front yard setback, but that's not a consequence of anything we're doing on the site. That's the existing structure that's on the site. So whether you want to say that it's grandfathered by virtue of it existing and us not extending that, or simply recognize this as an agricultural use, in which case you have the flexibility to vary those requirements anyway, doesn't really matter. But we're not doing anything to either increase or I guess decrease that setback or increase the extent of encroachment into that setback, or even extend the setback a further distance along that same line. You can see from this plan here that other than general interior renovations, we're not making any changes to the existing structure. The entire proposed addition to that structure and the greenhouses that are shown and shaded sort of that golden color here, those will all comply with your zoning setback requirements. And with that, I'll hand it over to Eileen.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Eileen Graff. So if we could actually just go one more slide, I'll help convey the architectural changes proposed. And as already mentioned, the existing building is the long structure on the right side of that site plan. And now if we go to the first architectural drawing, we can see that, right there, awesome. If we could go to the plan first, and then, or just to help orient. So in this plan, what we're looking at is, on the left side of the drawing is the existing building. So you can somewhat see a layout of a grid in that building to help sort of denote where the existing building is. But then it's got that wraparound covered porch. And so that existing structure is staying. We have no changes involved there other than renovating within. And there would be some window fenestrations and door openings that would be changing and probably sprucing up of some of the siding. But as a form, that structure is pretty much staying intact. And to the right of that, towards the rear, is our addition. So we're adding on to help supplement the functions within this within the building, extending some of the retail space, adding the function of the bakery, the butchery, adding the refrigeration needs that they have in this facility, and then also supporting the employees that are there. So, so break rooms, etc., all on the back side there. On the back right is where, top right is where you would see you would have the loading dock, as described by Steve earlier. So that's the area where the trucks will go down a slight ramp so that the produce can be unloaded at the same level as the building. So that's the intent there. In the dash line towards the street, that's showing the general footprint of where the new greenhouses would go. And then if we go to the next slide, we can take a look at what this building looks like. So on the top right, top drawing, you will see the original structure, again, that gable structure with the covered porch is the existing building. And our proposal to the right of that is the addition. The roof line of the addition falls below the what exists today. So the original structure is still the tallest with its ridge, and everything else proposed is below that. It's a one-story structure. We propose to do architectural shingles on the roof. The siding on this building would be a barn board, board and batten look. Similar to what the owner Matt has done in his other farm stands. And then windows likewise would be, divided lights, very traditional in its look, and a transom level to let the light in, but provide more function on the interior. Again, I mentioned there's some changes to places of entry for better flow, but otherwise the structure, the original structure, as mentioned, is staying intact. And to note, generally for, say, square footage, in case that's of question, the existing structure and footprint is about 4,032 in square feet. And what we're adding is about 9,240 square feet. And again, this is to help the function of the farm stand to what Matt really knows currently in the three properties that he has right now, and how it can best function. So he's using those as models, and that's what's guiding us to know how much he needs to add on. And with that, I will happy to answer questions at the end, but I will pass it back to Adam.
Thank you, Eileen. So if we go to the next slide, I just have a few more. These are more text than plans and drawings, just meant to sort of summarize for you and for the public who might be in attendance what we've already stated in the written narrative submittal that we made to the board with our formal application. So your site plan review criteria, we've identified them by letter as they are identified in your bylaw. The first here is that internal circulation and egress are such that traffic safety is protected and access via minor streets servicing single-family homes is minimized. Again, we believe that this proposal, as was just described to you, improves the general layout of the site. Today, the site does not have marked parking spaces. It's sort of a free-for-all with a fair amount of pavement. We've tried to improve that overall layout, provide for lined parking spaces. One thing we've talked already, and I suspect we'll talk more about impervious surface coverage, the requirements of your bylaw, what exists today, what is proposed, and as was just stated, we are proposing to increase that coverage, that lot coverage, insofar as Littleton incorporates pavement into that calculation. We have flexibility, and so we can certainly entertain a discussion about attempting to further reduce that coverage number through, for example, the use of gravel in lieu of pavement, or the use of permeable pavers. We are already incorporating, and I think it's referenced in one of these criteria, or the responses to one of these criteria, we're already incorporating a strip that surrounds the building. I think it's a 5-foot wide strip of permeable pavers. We could extend the extent of those permeable pavers, or again, we could use a more permeable surface. We think that the relatively minor increase from the 52.5% to a number closer to 60%, 59 and change, is minimal, but again, we have some flexibility within the site to make adjustments if necessary. Site plan review criteria B is visibility of parking areas from public ways and residences are minimized, and lighting of these areas avoids glare on adjoining properties. We've designed this site to keep the addition away from Great Road and Lawrence Street, to keep it more central to the site. And similarly, we've tried to associate parking in the immediate vicinity of the proposed farm stand. As you saw, we've proposed some screening, and I guess this gets into criterion C, major topographic changes and removal of existing trees shall be minimized. We are minimizing vegetation disturbance. We're making some topographical changes that we think improve the site. We have proposed that row of arborvitae along the westerly property line. We've attempted to work into our presentation tonight some responses to the feedback that we've received, particularly in the few letters that the board has received from neighbors. We haven't addressed every one of those comments. We are certainly prepared to do so tonight. But I saw one of the comments, for example, and I think it spoke to this westerly property line, was a request for a fence. Generally, when we design certainly something of an agricultural nature in a more suburban or rural community, we prefer to use live screening, vegetation, as opposed to fences. And my experience over the past 20 years is that generally that's what neighbors prefer as well. But it's not a one-size-fits-all. Some neighbors would prefer to have a fence, and we have flexibility there if we need to discuss alternatives, for example, to the row of arborvitae. But we felt that that would provide the best visual screening of the site from that property. Next slide. So criterion D, adequate access to each structure for fire and service equipment is provided. Again, we're improving the layout, and there will be adequate access surrounding the site. There is sufficient area. Site plan review criterion E, utilities and drainage in the vicinity are or will be made to be adequate based upon functional standards of your subdivision rules and regulations. We have submitted a drainage site plan. You just got a preview as to what that shows. Runoff will be treated and infiltrated, and as I mentioned, we've got this band surrounding the property of permeable pavers that will further help to infiltrate stormwater. And then lastly, item F in your site plan review criteria, methods of stormwater control and treatment as outlined in your low impact design and best management practices manual are utilized, and you can see there we're collecting, treating, and infiltrating the new paved areas. We're removing a portion of the existing pavement and replacing it with those permeable pavers I just referenced. We're directing some of the clean roof runoff to infiltration chambers, and we're making other drainage improvements to enhance groundwater recharge throughout the property. The next slide addresses your parking requirements. Again, this first bullet just highlights the fact that it's an agricultural use, and so the parking requirements need to be complied with in a reasonable fashion. We are proposing 71 parking spaces that will be marked in a manner that they are not today. We believe that that'll be sufficient for the demand, and again, we're basing that off of, and our client is basing that off of having operated for many years now 3 other locations of Tender Crop Farm, and based on that experience, understanding the number of parking spaces that are generally necessary to handle both routine and peak demands. And then the applicant is proposing, as I said, to stripe the parking spaces to improve not just the layout, but the overall flow and maneuverability of vehicles on the property. Then we get, lastly, to your Aquifer Protection Overlay District Special Permit, where you've got a series of criteria. I think there's 5 criteria in total. The 5th one is a sort of multifaceted. The first requires us to list all chemicals, pesticides, fuels, et cetera, that would be toxic or qualify as hazardous materials, as that term is defined in state law. That's not particularly applicable. We're not using hazardous materials other than routine amounts that would be used to fuel, for example, tractor that might be on the site. To the extent that there are going to be herbicides and pesticides used on the site in connection with the farming operations, those will comply in full with the state law concerning the Pesticide Control Act concerning their use. Item 2, a description of potentially toxic or hazardous waste. Same deal. We're not generating any toxic or hazardous waste, and so we don't intend to have to store any and then subsequently dispose of it. Criterion 3, evidence of approval by the Department of Environmental Quality Engineering, or DEP, of any industrial waste treatment or disposal systems, and of any wastewater treatment system over a capacity of 15,000 gallons per day. That won't be applicable to this project. Same standard with respect to underground storage of toxic or hazardous materials, which is not a component of this project. Analysis by a qualified engineer. Again, we've provided stamped plans by a registered professional engineer in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Continuing on the next slide. These are the special permit criteria, your general criteria for any special permit in the town of Littleton, be it an aquifer protection overlay district special permit or otherwise. The standard it says that special permits shall only be granted if there is no significant nuisance, hazard, or congestion created, and so long as there will be no substantial harm to the neighborhood or derogation from the intent of this chapter. That language mirrors in large part the standard in Chapter 40A, Section 9. Again, we don't believe there will be any significant nuisance, hazard, or congestion created by this proposal. We think it's a general overall improvement to the site, and we, as stated, believe that it satisfies the zoning bylaw, and to the extent that there are deviations from those requirements, it complies with the Dover Amendment's protection of agricultural uses and farm stands. And then finally, revitalizes an agricultural use, and the production and sale of farm products will comply with state statute. So for these reasons, we are before you again requesting both site plan approval and special permit for development in the Aquifer Protection Overlay District. We tried to limit the length of our presentation. I know that wasn't especially short, but again, we didn't work in answers proactively to every question that we've seen in advance so far, but we're happy to address anything that the board may ask of us, that the public may ask of us, whether it be relative to the agricultural uses of the site or specific to the design, layout, and anticipated operation of the site.
So we would have two separate but intertwined sets of questions about the agricultural use and the actual site plan. Or do we want to ask questions now, or wait, or have Tom do his presentation and ask them? Okay. Tom. We've asked our town council to be here, who has reviewed case law and I should explain. There's the actual law, and then there's the case law as develops over time when people bring challenges to that. And so we are going to have Tom talk to us about this universe of law relating to agricultural use.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the board, Tom Harrington, Town Council, nice to see you all. So we know that for your purposes, you're here to do site plan review and to review an application for the Aquifer Overlay Special Permit. That's what's before the board tonight. I also understand, however, that the agricultural component of this project has raised a number of questions. So I'm going to do my best to just address the agricultural component. I think it's important to understand that once this board does its work, and assuming approvals are issued, it would then go to the building inspector. The building inspector would issue the building permits for the projects and the buildings on site that the applicant would like to construct. As part of that, the building inspector, and I want to be careful because he has not done his analysis yet. I don't I don't want to do his analysis for him, and I don't want to put him in a corner. But I will tell you, he's going to do kind of a three-part analysis. Is this project allowed under the zoning bylaw? That's one. And we do know that agricultural is allowed in a residence district in Littleton and in this residence district in Littleton. And that would include farms and greenhouses. So insofar as what we see would fall under the definition or kind of the general definition of farms and greenhouses, he would likely approve it. If he sees something different, his next level of analysis would be, is this a pre-existing non-conforming use? So has the applicant secured the right to do what's on site because it's already been done? Again, I'm not here to do his job for him. I want to leave that analysis to him, but that would be his second level. His third level, under the situation where maybe he doesn't reach an affirmative conclusion on those one or two of those questions, would be to look to the Dover Amendment. The Dover Amendment tells us that the town cannot unreasonably regulate agricultural uses in its bylaw. And it has various definitions, and I think, and I understand that I think some of the concern in town is this farm stand going to kind of dwarf the agricultural use on the property? And in response to that, I'd say, assuming, and I'm not doing the building inspector's analysis for him, but assuming he issues the permits, I think that the comfort we take is from the Dover Amendment, and the Dover Amendment regulates what can be sold on site. And it boils down to this. From June to September, or during the harvest season, if otherwise applicable, the primary crops raised on the land account for 25% of the sales, either volume or gross sales. Or, and this or I'm about to give you is what I understand the applicant will be relying on, or, if not measured seasonally, at least 25% of the annual sales, either volume or gross sales dollars, are of crops raised on the land, and at least an additional 50% of the crops sold are raised on other land in Massachusetts. Moving on, the land must also be at least 5 acres, or it must be at least 2 acres and generate at least $1,000 per acre in gross sales dollars on land not zoned for agriculture. So in looking at this, I think there's the component that I think matters here is the ongoing regulation of the operation, right? It's, if the building inspector decides that this is allowed, it still needs to live within the strictures of the Dover Amendment. So that's going to mean, and I'm going to use some kind of gross examples here, right? But that's going to mean that at the end of the year, when they tally up their sales, 25% of those sales must be of produce grown on the land. And an additional 50% of their yearly income must be from crops that are raised on other land in Massachusetts, right? So they're either going to show us by dollars that 25% of the dollars we made were based on products grown right here on the land, and 50% were grown on other farms in Massachusetts. Or there's a volumetric measurement, and so I'm going to use a gross example here, and that example is, if there were 4 aisles in this farm stand, 1 aisle would be dedicated to produce grown on the land. 2 aisles would be dedicated to produce grown on other farms in Massachusetts, and then there's the 4th aisle. So that's general examples of the kind of the volume way of looking at things and the dollar way of looking at things. That's what the law tells us when someone comes forward with an agricultural use. Those are the controls we have. Littleton does allow agriculture as a matter of right in this district and is also a right to farm town. So we have that built into our zoning bylaw. I'm going to stop here, answer any questions you have or any questions that the audience has, or we can have Adam come back up. But I think it really boils down to that. That's what we're looking at here.
So, so when you say the land, you're talking about the site land?
The site.
So they have to generate 25% of their sales on site?
Correct.
And what is this June to September thing?
So
Because
that's in the Dover Amendment. I don't want to focus on it because it's my understanding that they're really going to rely on the second part of that, but it's a two-part. It's the Dover Amendment says that during the months of June, July, August, and September of each year, or during the harvest season of the primary crops raised on the land, the owner or lessee 25% of such products for sale based on either gross sales dollars or volume have been produced by the owner or lessee on the land on which the facility is located. Or, and then the or is what we discussed, the 25 and 50% component, and I believe that's what they're going to rely on.
Board, Anna, questions? I mean, understanding that this is complicated and we might be going back and forth.
So I actually have a question that I would like town council to address in terms of what our role is, in terms of a site review and what we can and cannot do under the rules of a site review.
So it's difficult to speak in a volume. It would be easier if you could identify what you would like to do under site plan. I know you've done many site plans in the past, so I think you have a pretty good idea of how site plan works.
Right. I think I'm doing it more so for our audience. And so from that standpoint, what is it that we, as a planning board, can do within a site review, right? We can.
Right. So I think Attorney Costa had a slide that spelled out the bylaw requirements for site plan. If we want to put that back up, it's, I looked at his slide, I think it's accurate, so
I think that what Anna's getting at is that the actual determination of use is not something
that's the question
we determine. However,
right, that's
it does seem related in the sense that one of the things about the site plan is the size of the building, the number of parking spots, which goes back to, the activities in the thing. So how...
I have a question related to the same thing that may be a little pointed. I think one of the terms that I heard during the presentation, I don't think you touched on it, was that we couldn't impose unreasonable regulation. What are the parameters that start defining unreasonable? They're doubling the size of the building, adding 100 more parking spots. What types of parameters are we talking about before that we hit that metric of unreasonable?
So
I think that ties together these questions that we're talking about.
This might be something to understand a little more what the applicant wants to do through your question and answer process, and understanding what you want a little more. I can't give you a number. I can't give you a metric. It's very much it's very case law based. So we need to understand what your concerns are, and then we can respond with, are they concerns that we can cover under site plan review, or are they beyond the scope?
So, since I still have the floor, I believe, the number one question was raised. I appreciate your example of this aisle is for what's grown here, these two aisles grown elsewhere in Massachusetts, and the fourth aisle, who knows? But how will we know if 25% of it is actually produced on site? How are we going to know? What is a reasonable manner for us to gather that?
That's a zoning determination. That'll be for the building inspector to determine how he wants to do that analysis in conjunction with how the applicant wants to respond to that. But the law is clear that they need to demonstrate 25% of the crops are grown on site, either by volume or sale, and 50% come from farms in Massachusetts, so that's 75%. How we get there is still an open question, and is part of kind of an ongoing analysis that the building inspector can do.
But
Do you mind if I jump onto your question for a second? So you use the volume example, but, you know, I had a slightly different interpretation when I read volume, because some products are sold by volume.
Right, and I don't know that there's a
And I
particularly
don't
good definition of volume
Right,
either.
you know,
Right.
cubic yards of soil, cubic yards
Yep.
of grain, things like that. But I imagine that the types of products they're selling there are more by unit or by weight, of which the volume doesn't really, doesn't mesh up there. So is, I guess, which way would we be, you know, trying to interpret that there, since it's not a volume-based products that they haven't said what they're selling, but I'm assuming they're selling farm stand type vegetables and stuff, and the meat would be by weight, not volume, things like that. So to me, it's leaning that the volume analogy you use probably is not applicable to this
So
site.
again, and respectfully, that's not for this board to determine, that's for the building inspector to determine how he wants to analyze it and how he wants to, what data he wants to collect to satisfy himself that they're meeting that criteria. There's certainly some wiggle room within the criteria, but I think we need to understand more what they're doing to allow him to determine what's the best way for him to analyze to make sure that they're staying within the restrictions of the Dover
So
Amendment.
we'll get around to the whole board, but I want to talk about this intersection between site plan review and agricultural use. And one thing that is not demonstrated in your presentation is what part of the site will be used for agriculture and what you commit to being used. You have a leach field in the middle of the area where you're going to be doing agriculture. And of course, greenhouses are considered to be agriculture. I think we would need more detail and more diagram of the amount of the site you're going to devote to achieve this agricultural use. Bartlett.
Well,
You done?
Yes, for now, I yield to.
Yeah, we can, we'll keep
to-
going,
to-
yeah.
To continue on that, I'm very skeptical about one greenhouse providing 25% of the sales, however measured, in a store the size of Idlewild that's going to be placed on that site. I'm very skeptical. I don't know, I mean, there's no indication that they're using any of the other property for it just says brush. And brush is not a marketable commodity that I know of. So I'm very skeptical. And there's a lot of questions about, there's details. He says there's not going to be, it doesn't look on the site plan like there's going to be any tractors there. I really don't know what's going on. I don't know I'm sure that there's going to be pesticides used in the greenhouse. I don't know what they're going to grow in there. So I just think that there's a lot of issues we need a lot more details of what this process is going to be.
Right, certainly, those are excellent questions for the applicant.
Daryl.
Sort of just limiting it to the Dover Amendment. I think I jumped in and I think got clarification on the two questions I had for that.
Mark.
I have two concerns. My first concern is.
Can you speak up, please?
Sorry, my first concern is the internal circulation. We haven't really seen how the tractor trailers and trucks are going to get to the back of the building.
Well, it's off Lawrence, it's off.
Well, that's what we need to talk about, whether or not we want it to come in off of Lawrence Street, because they're going to run through the neighborhood to get to Lawrence Street.
Yep.
To get there, it should all come off of 119. So we need to, when they get back up, they should show us how they propose to get the trucks to the back. The other thing is, what we're really kind of all talking about, but we're not saying, is what's the intensity of use that's going on there? A butcher shop, is that, Gary's Farm Stand didn't have a butcher shop. There's going to be a bakery in there. The hot dog truck and everything else, that's really not a farm issue. That's a town of Littleton, a zoning thing to allow trucks. I'm not concerned about that, but I'm concerned about the leap from going to sort of benign farm stand to something that's going to be a little more than a farm stand, and where do we come in and, I understand it's going to be building inspectors, but we need to really address what's really going inside that building, not just fruits and vegetables, pumpkins in the fall, Christmas trees. We all know that stuff's all coming, okay? They're going to put some greenhouses up and grow some flowers and things like that, and that kind of stuff, along the lines of Cup and Cup or something like that. But what's going to happen inside there? There's going to be food for processing, meat for processing, food for cooked for distribution. Is that going in there? Is there going to be a little sit-down area where you can actually eat inside of there? Those are the kind of things, the questions we need to find out once we get an idea of what's going on. I'm a little concerned about 71 parking spaces there if you're going to have 15, I think round numbers is 14,000 square feet of retail space there. If you're going to have, I guess what's in the back of my mind is what goes on at Idlewild. Is that what's coming here? How are we going to address the Idlewild is not a local farm stand. It's more than that. So a little concerned about what the intensity of use is out there.
So we're addressing our comments to you, Tom, and we
Right.
know that,
but
the applicant is taking notes.
But I think we should ask those questions. That's my point.
Absolutely.
You should too, if
In
you-
regards to Dover.
And, well, I'm trying to decide because there are definite just site plan review issues that I have with the project. I think your answer to item A, which is the applicant proposes an improved layout of the parking lot area. Well, I beg to disagree. I don't know if it's improved. You just put stripes on the existing paving, which was ad hoc based on whatever Gary's thing. My main concern are the curb cuts. Lawrence, the property along Lawrence Street is one giant curb cut. I think we would be totally remiss in not.
They shouldn't come down Lawrence Street.
No, I'm not sure I would allow even the loading from Lawrence Street. And then there's the issue of the way the parking lot dumps onto the intersection between Lawrence and Great Road is a mess. It's confusing. That roadway is very small. I don't think there should be just one giant curb cut on Great Road. It's confusing to people going in and out. I think the number of parking spots, I'm with Mark. What does that mean? How many for employees? How many for this? How many for that? I think you could, we use the term farm stand. And this is really pushing the definition of a farm stand in both its use and its size. And listen, Gary's was there for a long time. When you look at the website of the applicant, there's retail. Well, the comment about we need to know more than what's going. How many square foot of retail is it going to be? Is it going to be 20 by 20, or is it 400 square feet, or is it going to be 2,000 square feet? And the more retail you have, the harder it is going to be to overcome the definition of agricultural use. If I went through the site plan review, see major topographic changes, fine. Add fire access, fine. I do think it is a residential zone. You do need to, and you've shown some consideration for the abutters. There are two residential abutters. I agree with you. I think arborvitae is fine. However, if the abutters wanted a fence, I think we would ask for a fence. There are reasons for that. Number one, trash blowing in from the dumpster, which is located near the, the residential use, which might, you could reconsider that. I'm concerned about the noise of changing out the dumpster right next to someone's home. You have a large site. You can find some other place. I'm a little, I can see how the loading dock makes sense, but I'm concerned about the location next to the abutting residence, because that will be noisy. It might be early in the morning. We have in the past in site plan reviews conditioned them on hours of operation, and if it stayed there, we would probably limit the times that it could be used because of noise. Then there's things like lighting. There's no description of what lighting you're going to have on the building, on the parking lot. We need to know. Signage, there's no description of signage. We have a sign bylaw. Of course, there's things that we'd like to see that aren't necessarily in the bylaw. But so all in all, this is not a complete application for us to consider a site plan approval. Okay, I'm not yelling at you, Tom.
No. Are we done with Tom? Can we?
Yeah, Tom, you can sit down. I should have asked you to sit down.
You weren't really yelling at all.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I have 3 kids. I can show you what it's like to yell. So I appreciate the remarks. I mean, I guess a question I have, I mean, you're not wrong that you are entitled to ask, you as a board are entitled to ask for further details with respect to things like lighting and signage, and we can get you those details. I have answers to some of those questions, but I suspect you may want a more comprehensive plan that identifies lighting locations on the building, any lighting of the parking lot. I can answer questions in terms of the times at which lighting will be used and signage and whether the signage will be lit, but if you want supplemental plans, we can provide that. But I suppose a preliminary question I have, and I think it ties into something that Attorney Harrington said, is, I've got in my notes the various things that board members have remarked on, but as we started progressing in that discussion that was just had over the past 10 or 15 minutes, I heard questions starting to get asked. Initially it was, internal circulation. Concerns were raised about the lack of narrower curb cuts, whether it be on Great Road or elsewhere, and what that means in terms of the safety of entering or exiting the site. Those are certainly fair questions in the context of site plan review. But then I began to hear questions about, well, what's the extent of the retail use within the site? Because you see on Tender Crop's website that in other locations, they have 3 of them, there is a component that is a retail component. You started asking about the extent of the bakery use or the butchery use and things of that sort. I can give you answers to some of those questions, but it does seem to be delving into exactly what your counsel suggested was beyond the purview of the planning board, which is the extent to which this is a quote-unquote traditional farm stand as we came to know them 20, 30 years ago, which of course is different than what exists today in many locations.
Let me just say that maybe, yes, you are correct, but we have a community here that wants to know what's going on there. We have existing farm stands, which we know and love, that we want to know how they're going to be affected. And we want some kind of indication about what is the actual agricultural use going to be. It's not simply enough to say greenhouse. That's all you've indicated.
Sure.
That's all.
Also, it gives
I don't think we can get into auditing weights and volumes and all that kind of stuff. Maybe the building commissioner will, but we don't do that with any of the other farm stands.
But also, it gives us an insight as to how much parking you're going to need for what you're really proposing out there. That's, I think, where we tie it in.
Sure, and those tie-ins are entirely reasonable. So if
And
there are questions,
I agree. We can't figure out how many pounds of meat you're going to find and what percentage of that. We're going to need to rely on 25% of whatever you produce on-site is going to satisfy that first level for that farm stand. I think we can all safely get our hands around that part of it. But
And parking is an issue,
Parking.
which relates to the retail activity that you're going to have there. Mark brought up Idlewild. Idlewild has a huge parking problem, and they have to have remote parking for their employees.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, to add on to what Mark was just saying, so part of what is in our purview under site plan review is traffic and circulation, so addressing potential traffic impacts. So one of the things that has happened over the last, say, 10 years is that Gary's farmstead traffic has been reduced as a result of the operation getting reduced. So we don't have any idea what a true 71 parked car traffic situation would look like. So from that standpoint, I think we need to address what the traffic impact is going to be as well, and getting our hands around that.
And we need to acknowledge that Lawrence Street is a residential street, and that right now it's completely open to in and out from the farm stand. And I would suggest that even if you provided 71 spots, instead of just striping the existing, try to do normal development standards and reduce the level of, reduce the area of parking, and to get 71 spots. You have gigantic, there's just big areas of, and the other thing I would say is that you need to, on site plan review, and I think it's within our purview, to look at the food truck and Ed's Weenies, because right now that's just a free-for-all of people parked here and there.
Sure, and to just address that last point, I don't really anticipate those uses are going to continue on the site.
Well, that's fine. But then say that,
Sure.
Okay. And if you do think that you want to accommodate them, maybe work a little harder to make a place for them. Okay, now.
So I have one water-related question there. So 3 weeks ago, we had quite a nice little rainstorm, and there's like 3 to 6 inches of standing water in where you call, right near the area called drain and grass, which is also the lowest point on the lot. I don't see anything in this plan that really addresses how you're going to deal with the existing standing water issues in the site. And given that actually everything actually slopes towards that spot.
I was not aware there was a existing drainage issues there. As part of the proposal, obviously we'd want to mitigate that. What we'd have to do would analyze the drainage area there and implement either. The site's so flat, it's really difficult to. You really can't put a drain in and daylight it. You have to grab it, infiltrate it on site. So what we'd have to do there is put a drain in and get the water into the free-flowing gravel underneath the the free-flowing gravel. So we'd have to look to do drainage improvements there. Then also I'd be looking, there'd be wholesale changes if we were going to implement better circulation, more efficient parking. We could saw cut and remove some of the pavement to formalize the parking. You don't need that massive width. You only need 60 feet for a bay. I'm not sure what's there, but there is opportunity to reduce paving and still maintain 71 parking spaces, or maybe even more, with the same amount of pavement.
And I think relative to how the site is being presented, they're dealing with the significant issues, and then creatively, there's an opportunity to creatively address the Lawrence Street access issue and that drainage, with either a bigger green space that actually goes down Lawrence Street in order to be your basin there. But the plans as presented are just, we're going to build a new big building and put some things in it here. But that, relative to drainage and water, which is it's in the water aquifer district, I think that has to be much more clearly dealt with, and it's not dealt with at all in this set of plans that we have in front of us.
You have dealt with it. You have infiltration basins.
Not relative
not
to
there.
the fact that there's
Yeah.
huge standing water after a storm.
We did not. I do admit the existing conditions. We just let it lie. We did address the new building with infiltration and the new paved area with infiltration. But we will look at, given the concerns, we will look at providing a more efficient access to the property and then protection to Lawrence Street also.
At this point, we have many community members here, and I would like to invite people to speak. We usually have a 2-minute limit. And I'm doing this for your benefit, so that you can hear what concerns are. We have a 2-minute limit, and I'd like people to not, to make, well, also to make their point that might be different from the 5 previous points. So anyway, that being said, who would like to speak? Yes, and state your name and address.
My name is Dave Harwood. I live at 24 Elmwood. And it seems apparent that there's going to be a requirement to prove the 25%, 50% requirement. And they'll come up with a plan that I'm sure sounds like it works. What if it doesn't work? What if is there going to be a compliance that they have to report where they get the 25% and 50%? And what's the consequence if they don't make it?
Well, that's a point. I would say that we don't audit any of the farm stands in town. There have been historically farm stands that would have failed the audit. So, I don't know what to tell you.
I think what you could
It's
say.
a building, it would, as Tom just explained to us, it's someone like yourself, making a complaint to the building commissioner, who would then determine what the motive.
But you do have historical data. They have 3 other sites. They could probably share, not with us, but probably with the building department, their
Yes.
percent of their sales on those sites, how they relate to the Dover.
Right.
So we could ask for that to relate. Would that make sense, Tom?
Yeah, it may make sense. And again,
It's not our purview,
right,
though.
it's the building commissioner's analysis, and I want to not prejudge for him, but it's certainly
Right.
something we can talk to.
Next. Yes.
So I live at 4 Colburn, I'm Chandris Kumari, so very
So
nice
you were a
to-
direct abutter?
Yes. So, let me just start with saying, first of all, we love our farm stands. That's the defining character of our neighborhoods. But the proposal that as is, it seems like, it goes beyond the typical definition of the agriculture use. The most, I think, concerning thing is as the planning board pointed out, lack of information and transparency in the proposal. And a lot of information missing, and then it's whatever the information it is, and it's clearly indicated that it's a expansion of commercial use, a lot of building expansion. There is a retail operations. We don't know the size, how much. Loading dock, that's definitely a concern. As is operation right now, it's there's a traffic, privacy, and noise concerns, and there is no information how that's going to be mitigated or how that's going to be handled during the business hours as well as during the constructions. And there is definitely a health and environmental concerns as well. This is all as is if it works as planned. But even then, what we are hearing with the Litchfield expansion, the butcher shop, and water quality and the stormwater management and all that information, it's not very clear based on the proposed plan, and also the residential character, the defining character that we have. If there is too much of commercial activities there, then I don't know how that plays with the residential zone that exists today.
Thank you. Thank you. Next.
Mark Rambacher, 205 Hartwell. I have a couple comments and a couple questions. First, you said the existing farms, we don't audit them and they don't necessarily comply.
I didn't say they don't comply.
They don't, none of the existing farms use the Dover Amendment. They use the agricultural bylaw, which says 5 acres, and it's a completely separate set of laws.
I wasn't referring to the 2
No.
neighboring farm stands. I was referring to a farm stand that no longer exists.
Right. My question for the planning board, the existing farm stands that we have there all operate till 7 or 8 o'clock, right? This is a residential neighborhood. If this does go forward, can we put time restrictions on their
Absolutely.
hours of operation so that, there's not lights till 9, 10, 11
That is
o'clock?
traditionally something that
So
we have done on
It's
site
not
plan
something
review.
you've talked about so far, but.
Yeah. Yes.
Katrina Parks Hagberg, 156 Hartwell Ave. We live in the neighborhood behind the farm. One thing, as we've talked about under your purview, is traffic concerns, and I think coming off of Hartwell with traffic trying to get off of Springbrook, which is across the street, can sometimes be very challenging, especially during rush hour timeframes during the day, and even non-rush hour timeframes during the day, given the traffic running east or west on Great Road. And so one concern I have with the increased traffic just within the new property is what can be done to help mitigate the traffic concerns right in that congested area of time so that residents can get out onto 119 safely and people can get into the property safely.
I agree with you. It's not clear what that would be, but I think that it's making, in my view, limiting access from Lawrence Street and more well defining the access onto Great Road, and it might be creating an additional access onto Great Road that's apart from the existing one. It's tough, because I go to these farm stands, and Saturday morning, it's crazy, and I don't live there, so I don't know what it's like during the normal day, but it's something to consider, absolutely.
And then my second follow-up question is, Hartwell is a no-truck road, although trucks go down it, although they shouldn't. So delivery vehicles going down Hartwell to get to Lawrence for ease of backing in would be ideally would be looked at as well.
That's
I
fair.
agree, they should do no truck traffic.
I agree, especially on Hartwell.
So, it's within our purview to say, please look at the Great Road access thing. It's currently listed, I think, as 200 feet on the drawing, that to collapse that down more towards a standard 50-foot or whatever this typical entryway is and move it away from the corner of Lawrence is things that we'd like to see that would make this a more desirable plan. It would address some of the concerns within the limits of the existing property.
Better internal circulation.
Yeah, but I don't want to mince words in terms of that we just give, something abstract. And we're looking for something to improve there specifically.
I agree.
And why don't we just say
I think we can
that?
have input from the site engineer about, what we're saying is that the intersection of Lawrence and Great Road is tremendously congested, and it is a burden on the neighborhood. And that's one of the considerations we make in the site plan review. So what are the things we could do along Great Road? And whether that, it's a state highway, I don't know what that involves, but you had this gigantic curb cut kind of be made into an entrance and an exit, and, things like that.
Yeah, so based on the meeting tonight, there are improvements there. That would be an access permit with MassDOT, but we've done that, rearranged. They would prefer to have that. I imagine MassDOT would embrace the fact of narrowing up that and making it a more concentrated in and out, not this massive opening.
There's certainly some legwork required, of course, when dealing with Mass DOT.
We totally understand.
Having said that, most instances in which I've been involved seeking access permits, you're asking for an additional curb cut,
right,
or a new curb cut.
We want to
condensing and limiting curb cuts. I suspect will be a simpler process, but not without its red tape. But I appreciate, Mr. Chair, you asking for some specificity, and Mr. Baker, you providing specificity, narrow it from 200 feet down to 50 feet. But I also appreciate some of the flexibility, because as we begin to go back to the drawing board and look at how we can rearrange internally some of the parking areas, that may provide a certain flow of traffic that would pair up well with a 50-foot entrance here versus there, or multiple points of entrance, as you had suggested.
And that's just a representative thing. It's not directive there, but it's just things that I don't know if they've been in your calculus of thinking at this point. So I'd encourage them to become in your calculus.
Anything else? Anyone else? There was, okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Margaret Soto. I'm your closest neighbor, so I've been with Gary for 40 years, and I know the arborvitae sound like a good idea, but I would prefer a fence after what I've had to put up with for the last 40, and I love Gary. I'm very concerned about the noise. Gary's sons did not run the farm stand, but they had some kind of, I don't know, they went to farmers markets, and they were constantly delivering things, and the dumpster was being dumped at 5 o'clock in the morning. I am surrounded by farms, and I am up at 5 o'clock in the morning listening to that.
Dumpsters, yeah.
And I wasn't happy, and I didn't say much to them, because I figured, well, they've been there 40 years, what am I gonna say? So now it's time for me to speak up.
Okay,
I've been
thank
quiet
you.
long enough. I really have, and I'm sure you've seen the property and what it looks like. It's disgusting and disgraceful. That bothers me. The dumpsters are a big thing. The loading dock and trucks coming in that way really makes me very nervous. The traffic, it's treacherous to get out of our street. I mean, you take your life in your hands every single day, so I can't even imagine, what it's going to be like when you add all that other big truck traffic to the situation. I love the idea of your farm stand. It looks beautiful. I think it's way too big. It's so close to my property. I don't know, maybe I'm being too personal, but...
This is what these hearings are for.
Because I love the idea of it, but I don't know if I like all the other stuff that goes with it, unfortunately.
Next, anyone else? There was, yeah, right in the back.
So I'm at 6 Coburn Lane. My name is Vandana, so I abut next to his, so we've been there, we were the first owners of the house, so we've been there since 97. And while Gary was in full operation, we used to get all kinds of bad smell, all kinds of traffic, trucks of Gary going back and forth, and anything that went on with Gary. Even walking around right now in Lawrence, like she was saying, MRG is my neighbor. She said walking on Lawrence is impossible. Walking on our Coburn Lane is also not possible. I have 2 dogs, so I walk every day. The amount of traffic has already increased without this magnificent or big building that they want to build over there. So my biggest concern is the size of the building that's going to be there, which is close to like an Idlewild. And then the area that has some agriculture, like Gary used to grow some eggplant and tomatoes and zucchini and what have you. That is not going to meet the Massachusetts law of Chapter 40. I've read some of the laws, just like you guys you already know about it. I don't think that can ever meet, but I don't know anything about agriculture other than going to the other stands. Secondly, we have beautiful stands across the street from us. We have Theo's, and then we also have Springbrook. They're selling the produce that they're growing right over there behind, and they do not have 71 parking spaces. I've never seen they're all gravel, and but if there is some, they're selling maybe some special event at Theo's. I know they have to park on the road, so some special event during fall, we'll have to have that traffic congestion. But I still don't understand why they need 71 parking spaces for what. And again, for such a big operation that's going to be selling butchering and all the other products that they want to get, they'll be getting from somewhere else other than Littleton or even in the radius of Littleton. I don't think they're going to be getting anything from here that's going to benefit any one of us. So this huge building I really read the plans, which I normally don't come to town meetings, but I think if the honorable members of the planning board would consider what would happen to all of us who are right there in the middle of this.
One thing I want to bring up, based on your comments, is about the smells. It's a right to farm. We have no jurisdiction over that. Unless they were, running a diesel exhaust, repair shop or something like that. But anyway, thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Hi, Matthew.
Matthew Nordhaus, Star Hill Road. I recognize that the 25% is not the purview of this board, but I just want to acknowledge that what you are doing if you say we cannot enforce this, we cannot make rules about the 25%. is essentially, throwing poor Henry to the wolves to do a job that you admit he has never done, and we have no infrastructure or funding to do. I think that relying on the applicant to self-report on percentages is like the wolf counting the sheep, and I would prefer not to do that. And we are going to have to find a way to equitably audit this, and it's not going to be free. So I just want to acknowledge that and make sure that everybody is aware.
Well, I think one thing that the applicant should take away is we want some credible, even if it's just a diagram, some credible way of showing that there will be agriculture produced on this site. And right now, that doesn't exist.
We need a site plan that's going to reflect what's going on there, how much of it is going to be in-house agricultural.
And I do not think we need to, count items, but right now, it's not credible that the agriculture use will be met. And it may be, there may be characteristics of the site that allow that, but what we're seeing now, it's not shown.
At a minimum, calling what potentially is the largest cultivation area a brush area.
Well, that's an existing condition.
No, it's on the final plan.
It is.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. And there's a leach field in the middle of it.
So I think, there's some formalities just in terms of, making sure that what we're looking at actually reflects what's going on there. Because I don't want to see an acre of brush.
No, that's fair. I think the representation was made that the leaching field was not fully designed, so it was just an approximate location. But your point is well taken that, well, let's make it less approximate if we're going to be using portions of that site for agriculture. The existing conditions plan did show the brush area. I didn't realize that terminology had carried over to the final plan. I don't think that was the intent. On one of the final plans that I saw, it was not on there. There were just the symbols showing that it was an area that was grassed or agriculture. But if it's on the final plan, then that's our mistake. It shouldn't be continued to be labeled as a brush area.
It's actually, that's from the X-reference, it's the.
I understand,
Yeah.
I understand, but we're relating to drawings. Yes.
Frank Matheson, Littleton Palmer. If you take the lot size, 2.9 acres, and you take half of it, and you put a building up, and you put pavement in, that's gonna leave 1.4. And then you have a septic system that's gonna take up probably another quarter of an acre, at least. There is no way that he can raise 25% of the crops to supply that farm stand if you have 70 parking spaces out there. There's no way.
Next. Thank you.
I think that's a valid point. I think when you come back, you need to show us, based on your other farm stands, how you propose to get this, so that we have some sort of level of confidence that you're going to make, because obviously you're going by the Dover bylaws, so you have to show us that you can at least meet that criteria. So we don't have to have an accountant, we don't have to have Price Waterhouse live in Littleton so we can find out what we got. So if you could show us how you've done it at other locations, I think that would give us a better, and I agree with Mr. Matheson, it's going to be hard pressed to, based on everything else you're trying to squeeze onto the lot, to show us that you can, how you're going to do it.
To add just one thing though, I know we haven't audited those things in the past or looked in it, but I think we have to let the residents know that if that is what the basis of what they're going to have approval to operate under, it will be incorporated into town operations. That we're not going to have a law and a set of regulations and then no mechanism within the town to do it. And if we need to work with the zoning enforcement officer or the board of selectmen in terms of making sure that that activity is properly staffed and funded, then we need to do that.
I think it starts with the leap of faith that they have to prove to us that they have the potential to do it.
But we shouldn't let the citizens think that we're not going to check. And there's ambiguity in
it's going to be Henry's job.
We being the town.
It's going to be Henry's job. As town council said, it's going to be Henry's job.
This is an issue. We're not going to deal with it at this meeting.
Mr. Chair, I would like to say that I am appreciative of our board actually talking about putting these kind of measures into place so that we can count on the fact that it will be done, that it will be enforced. And part of it is because after being on this board for 7 years, there have been times where applicants come forward and they say, I'm going to do X, and then they come back and say, oh, well, you know, we really didn't think we had all of the information, and so we kind of had our conjecture when we came before you. And then the town is the one that winds up eating it, whatever it is. So I really do appreciate the fact that we're doing this right now.
So let's just put something in the past. Well, Matthew's point, well, it's money, you know, what is this, you know, blah, blah, blah. But in the past, we have usually used, and I don't think we have any format that we can do this, but we've used a special permit process where, you know, every 3 years, a special permit would need to be, renewed, at which point you would have to demonstrate that you have met the conditions. I don't know if we can do that in this case, but it's a mechanism that we could consider. And Tom's shaking his head. Because we don't have a bylaw that allows us to do that. Anyway, yeah.
Nor, if I could, and town council can correct me, but for context, I also represent 36 communities across the state, so I'm often giving advice to boards like yours. Nor could you have a bylaw that does that, right? So we're coming in under the agricultural exemption. So all that we've been discussing in terms of the 25% standard, the 50% standard, growing on-site, growing off-site, growing by the owner, growing by other Massachusetts farm owners, these are not provisions of your local bylaw. These are provisions of state statute, right? So you couldn't adopt, you would have no authority, the AG wouldn't approve a bylaw that attempted to further regulate agricultural uses in a manner that subjected them to a special permit process renewable on 3-year terms, only if and when the applicant proves that it's in compliance with the state statute. Having said that, we're still required to comply with the state statute, and there still is a need for enforcement by the municipality.
So in the context of a site plan review, we just need more information to understand whether it's even possible to, you know, regardless of how the place is operated.
I've heard that, and we will provide supplemental information for your next meeting.
Thank you. Great. Now, would you be ready for our next monthly meeting, or would you need more time?
You meet on a monthly basis, so 4 weeks?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
July.
Because at this point,
not that far.
July 10th.
At this point, I think it's time to continue the hearing to a time specific, and whether it's our July or August meeting.
July 10th, is that what you said?
Yes.
So what I will say is this. I as you know, because I've represented in our filings, I don't represent Gary or Gary's family. I represent the prospective purchaser of the property. So there's some urgency in moving the process forward. Mm-hmm. My client would not be happy with me if I said, let's kick this out to your August meeting. Having said that, I'm not going to require you to add it to your agenda if we're not prepared to submit. So we will seek a continuance.
We can add it to our agenda, and you can notify us.
We will.
Whether you need a further continuation. But we'll put it on the agenda in
You can
July.
also come before us with revisions that you've done. Maybe they don't get it all done, but at least show us where you're going with this.
We will do that.
That would be good for.
And so for everyone here, especially the abutters, you will not be noticed further. So, check the website, the planning board website, and July 10th is the next time we will have a hearing. We will continue this hearing.
8:10.
8:10.
So, may I have a motion to continue this hearing to July 10th at 8:10?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out, and thank you for the applicant, and thank you to Tom. Okay, let's, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.